hell, there are a whole bunch of things that are true always that the Diddy trial is about. Even if the entire thing is made up, I didn't even watch it because I know that. But since before the trial, Diddy was involved with people that take fake pictures of people that use parties. It was a party tied to a Frankie Reese, involved with people with the state connection corrections offices and the state judicial branch offices and Weathersfield Police with a bunch of other police departments throughout the state. Involved too with the people that escaped from that prison. Involved with Facebook also with identity theft, fraud, slanders with courts and the state judicial branch offices and with the people that run the prisons. Involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, pretending passions and emotions on Facebook to fake ties to people, to cover up live progressions, as their roles with the FBI Director Robert Luskin and the families and intimate ties of New Britain Superior Court and West Hartford, and Hartford courts with West Hartford campuses and a park there and a religious spot, and people involved with the West Farms Mall and shopping centers and other malls through time with people from Weathersfield, with the judicial branch offices and the corrections offices, involved with the names, taking pictures next of people next to campuses and spreading lies about it, making criminal instances, and then pulling other kids into it by fake and framing them. They're framing people with the Diddy thing, whether they want to or not. In other words, even, I'm not saying about Diddy or who's guilty or not. I'm just saying they are framing people by with the people the reports on it. People aren't supposed to make allegations; they just repeat allegations, and they have the prosecutors and judges and their family members increasingly involved with that. Increasingly on the sides of my high school are people who acted so other people could take pictures of me. There are proofs of it, and that they're trying to pretend because these are people with all sides of criminal and civil cases and names and families of people with the courts and people tied to them and all sides of the cases at the same time, and the news putting the same predicate acts, the same fake conversations. WFSB Channel 3 News, fake conversations with me. Also has collusions with campuses associated with Puff Daddy and and with other celebrities like Trinity College. Involved also with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, increasingly planting evidences with other FBI and intelligence at corners of streets, like at the corner of Griswold Street and Fairlane Drive, with a whole bunch of people tied to a Joshua Striker. And I only know that from confessions from strangers and demonstrations. I never had a word of conversation with a Joshua Striker. He's increasingly tried to get me to sell drugs with them. They were trying to frame me through UPS. I didn't even tell on him. And that was years ago. And then later, then some of the kid was saying who he was one of the boyfriends of a Bobby. There's men and women that use the same name Bobby and they switch it with the intelligence. She might have been trained by intelligence with Central Connecticut State University. They have people that train the state police, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw, and collusion/S, also with foreign and domestic military before the World Trade Center attack as roles, including with the Saudi attackers forced to collusions and the Americans forced to collusions with other natures of organized crimes that the World Trade Center is still involved with. Increasingly self-valued roles too, otherwise sensing for the breaching method anyone who's not self-valued roles. You guys have inside the nature of debates, regardless of formal debates or between people. Self-value use/S of criminally born influence, tactical delusions raw. Factual nature, qualities, aspects, in nature itself as criminal insidious, as criminally foreign influence, substance, value, nature, black pupils, beard. I'll see the whites of eyes. I'll rise. In other words. So Weathersfield police have a Frankie Reese involved with digital and crimes with them with whiting forensics in the state corrections offices, increasingly with people named Cololo, and tomorrow also with foreign and domestic military. And they were and a Dillon family has role. Weathersfield police fake conversations with me as a kid, now as an adult. They have people involved with overt criminal enterprises, plural, and with private ones at the same time. and with the educators of people involved with that and people tied to them. And ones I didn't even have classes with. And the other ones, they're recorded. They're putting fake ties, fake major ties between kids, in ways so that no one could ever respond to it properly. They have whole careers kept criminally poor and impulse, tactically delusions raw. I never had a word of conversation with the Charlie Bows and never saw him around the campuses. The Charlie Bows is one of the people at Trinity College. A whole bunch of people tied to a Ray Cole and an Oliveri family. And and per him and others like a Mark Violet and Eric Jensen have and a Mr. Neville has a Matt Olson and a Mark Olson, or a Matt Olson and an Eric Olson. Someone tied to a Matt Olson, and a whole bunch of people tied to state police, interstate, and FBI and courts, and intercities involved too. With identity theft, fraud, slanders, they only saw them make one quick exception on my street, and they were trying to plant evidence on Trinity on Zion Street next to Trinity College when I was a kid with my neighbor, putting fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, as their collusions with sexual circles involved with the same girl abused by a whole bunch of guys, and they lied to her about themselves and about others. In other words, I didn't even know her to fill her in like that, and she was only making confessions and demonstrations to me. They're the same ones involved with overt criminal enterprise, private ones. I recorded that. They hid that. Increasingly, the FBI has roles, and with other agencies and countries, with each age and nature of campus, also with the names next to them, also involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, also manifest that way because that's one of the things against every single person, sickly distinctly. Even though sickly non-distinctly, it is recorded how we now have not countered that. That's recorded too. See, even these greatly evil, bad things, they can be turned into hyper positives. And we could check to make sure it's not just criminal insidious natures of positives being made from negatives as the breaching method employed to only be fathomable, to only be, that's what people strive for. They can't afford to have nature's short words the way nature wants them proper with conviction, let alone with conviction with guilt, exactly the way the breaching method. You guys have convictions with guilt, exactly the breaching method wants and needs. So it means nature's. That's the way it receives. Lease of Hadiths. Force, space nature transfer, it's forced. I never heard it, never read it defined this way. But the sciences have criminal foreign influence, tactical delusions, and they have sequence shift self-value with the readings of the Old Testament and of the Quran. And the difference of their guilt with that, the people who are counting them or the people that are defending the religions with passions and emotions. They're defending them out of sequence. They're using the difference of them and other people that share things they agree about as a collusion, as an array, as collusion against the human species body of individual bodies, all group differences generated by itself for its own discernment system. It's a perfect / hyper perfect method, an identity of value / value progression that we could use. That's just how the mind and reason works. Black people, I'm not even a doctor. I could delineate their delusions from their criminally foreign influence, factory nature, quality aspects, and nature of collusions, replacing what black pupils, whites of eyes, have said, not with words, but nature itself is bread. So we have the eyes distinct from the other species bodies, but non-distinct and simultaneous / hyper simultaneous, as that which we discern, which is not us nor them, but as all things anyway. And so how we could check, we could sense when there is the smallest finite detail left out or replaced. If we're using systems tactical ulterior from nature's, that which is hyper native pure, and showing us to appreciate the difference between how the Native Americans and the imposition upon that as the value of chief and the impositions upon the president, we're the colonists and the state's people. We're still, by the same breaching method, playing our differences right through ourselves, originally and still. That's why how the Native Americans, and that's why how the suburbs are still designed since before America's founders were born, by the method that had slavery, torture, extortion method entrenched, northern colonies and southern colonies. Our own black pupils, whites of eyes, communications replaced. All pace, begin to tread all shadow box. It hurts not one. The species body of individual bodies longs to tread. It only feels like gain /S or else we sense this way. And pantheism, if they finish it, and I'm sure that because they say, oh, America and China, but they came to the plan, and Russia and Ukraine, the war's over, so that we could start stacking means to end the needs to war and to replace. People are going to have no jobs because the ones with badges and who are doctors of psychiatry right through world wars, they're going to have to go. And they're the ones with gavels, in other words. They're going to have to be re-educated. In other words, and they have worse than criminal competence, collusion /S with all kinds of organized crime acts and methods like predicate acts method, wire crime methods like fake transcripts. Here, we didn't know, in other words, time used as a weapon for torture, extortion, and slavery, styles of it. Well, that's my job. In other words, we're going to address the private criminal enterprises the way our founders communicated for us too. Black pupils, it is time. So a whole bunch of people talked about Frankie Reese, and with the intelligence community has people show up at locations of parties so they could hide what came first and other things. And they could just have people, in all natures of investigations, investigators never stopped being and having been used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, toxicity, delusions, raw, collusion /S, and to keep the breaching method screened in the future too. And nature's demonstrations of it to keep roles, needs, and natures, blaming other things, others, ourselves. Nature's demonstrations of that. And they are given means to. So there are news reports and news locations associated with the Clinton Correctional Facility where they have all kinds of medical corruption too involved with the campuses and with the with identity theft, fraud, slanders of the kids, of the leaders of the kids, like deans of kids, like a dean judge is increasingly involved with former director of the F.B.I, Robert Luskin, and Hartford courts and the Britain Superior Court with confessions and demonstrations and confirmations of their roles with federal evidence crimes, with all sides of criminal and civil cases, including and of depositions, including the deposition of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, their family members, and their neighbors. Also, collusions increasingly with people and places associated with his lawyer and their lawyer, Robert Luskin and his co-defendants, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and the former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Note evolved from OCA, the Organized Crime Control Act. These are people that are collusion /S through administrations, keeping cultural differences, intercultural and intracultural. Ones with the name Colo and Mayano and DeMoro have identity theft, fraud, slanders, and roles sticking fake things in databases with Wethersfield police and campuses with their educators, increasingly the roles with military, foreign and domestic, at Central Connecticut State University. I never saw a Ray Colo on that campus in my life. Increasingly, people with multiple departments have collusions with predicate acts with them, and with the Phil Colo and people tied to him. Increasingly involved with proven child abusers, leaders of kids, first forced roles. Why don't you just go over there and punch the person? These are people with the judges and prosecutors involved with untimely deaths with their kids, too, roles, and identity theft frauds with the news at the same time, and their collusions with names with the corrections officers and judicial branch officers, and fake motivations increasingly because they're screening their actual motivations, which are criminal foreign influences and delusions. Get them on paper, one name in sequence. Facebook has roles with them with a Trantolo and Trantolo, and people placing ad placements, fake motivations too, motivation screening, even with real ones. All kinds of communications, racketeering, identity theft, fraud, slanders with people tied to a Trantolo and Trantolo, involved with news locations, with the World Trade Center predicate acts, with WFSB, and pretending passions and emotions when we mentioned little parts of their predicate acts roles. I barely had words with him at all. And the people that worked for him, he recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, are involved with them with conspiracy theory, with the use of that phrase to force child abusers and wire mail crime method roles and federal evidences racketeering with courts, names, and families involved with them. It has somebody there are proofs that, in other words, the judicial branch offices and corrections offices are personally and professionally involved with them with that. Besides more than we could discern, if you guys will get them on paper with the WFSB and their sources, and the people, in other words, and get me off of fake conversations with WFSB about the World Trade Center attack, with them, with them, and me with others, including with doctors. They put me to fake ties to a doctor, to doctors as a kid, and then as an adult too. Let's get them on paper, one name and sequence. They pretended my mother too. They told them I had a mental diagnosis and doctor when I was a kid. That's fake. They just faked that. My mother doesn't even know they did that. In other words, I'm a grown man. They're playing games intercities. That's why the Wethersfield police are leaking this and pretending others, lying about what they think about my motivations with the prosecutors and judges personally and professionally involved with the same house and slash S people tied to them with untimely deaths on my street making confessions like the Robert Rodriguez. That's why I didn't respond to him on my street both times. The only times I ever saw him on my street. In other words, and I never had a communications with him. One time I walked by him years ago on Route 3, right after I met a John DeMoro and a Joe DeMoro, they were involved with my fifth grade teacher. After I got out of high school, they made a bunch of confessions tied to that. I had nothing to do with him. I mean, after I got out of grammar school, I had nothing to do with them in grammar school. And in middle school, hardly at all, too. The only exceptions were them trying to plant fake exceptions and planting evidences. That's recorded various ways, too. And them recorded trying to pretend others were recorded. All along Route 3 in conjunctions into that. John DeMoro and Joe DeMoro and their brother, Paul DeMoro. I only had one conversation with him ever. And their neighbors, too, increasingly involved with foreign and domestic military and medical families, has something to do with their roles from the founding locations in Old Wethersfield, all over from those locations. Also with Jerry Kerr, and his brother, Michael Kerr, and he has a father named Jerry Kerr, too. They're increasingly involved with Officer Jerry Miller on Facebook, too, with them planting evidence on all sides of my house. And with their educators, and more than one of my educators that I never had personal conversations with. They went out of their way to try to make it look like other, including with, women roles with sexual and medical offenders of little girls and boys. And now they have like sexual harassment too roles with uses of their own sexual differences and then pretend it's personal against themselves. They're putting fake motivations. They're also screening motivations because they have a whole bunch of different countries involved with the names with games like that and the roles next to the campuses with the same house slash S through time, increasingly involved with wired crimes with Wethersfield police and time collusions with names with families from other police departments and retired police chiefs and their intimate ties. All rise.